go ahead and call the meeting to order for the second meeting of the Budget Review Subcommittee on Transportation. This time I ask the Secretary to please call the roll.
Senator Storm, Senator Turner, Senator Yates, Representative Branscombe, Representative Dietz, Representative Huff, Representative McPherson, Representative Palumbo, Representative Smith, Representative Tackett Lafferty, Senator Mays Bledsoe, Senator McDaniel, Representative Blanton, Representative Bowling, Representative Bray, Representative Petrie, Co-Chair Higdon, Chair Upchurch.
Here. All right, we're going to skip over the approval of the minutes for right now. And the next item on the agenda is the Kentucky State Police going over the road front appropriations. We have with us Jeremy Ham, Lieutenant Colonel, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Jeremy Ham, who's the Executive Director of Office Administrative Services, and Major Emily Horn, Director, Division of Commercial Vehicle Enforcement. So if you all want to come on up to the table, please identify yourselves for the record, and you may proceed.
My name is Jeremy Ham. I am the Lieutenant Colonel over the Office of Administrative Services with Kentucky State Police.
My name is Emily Horton. I am the Major over the Division of Commercial Vehicle Enforcement.
You may proceed. I think I may have referred to you as Emily Horn, but Emily
okay.
Horton. So, sorry about that. You may proceed.
Okay. Regarding our appropriation for the road fund appropriation, I think just generally speaking about that appropriation, I believe there was a question about how those dollars are spent. Roughly out of last year's appropriation, $58,747,494.91. $51,477,687.33 was spent on personnel cost. 6.381 spent on operating cost. 885,000 spent on vehicles. Typically, our road fund appropriation, what we do is we associate road fund dollars with a road trooper. So those funds that are awarded to us, we use that to support our road troopers. Some of the operating costs include fuel, our auto insurance, and vehicle supplies and parts. That is largely the operating costs that we use those dollars for.
Anybody got any questions at this point? Senator Higdon?
I'm going to save them. I'll wait.
Okay, well, what we'll do is just wait till both of you have presented, and then we'll open it up for questions. So you may proceed.
I'm here to represent the commercial vehicle side of that, and our road fund basically mimics theirs. Personnel is our largest portion of that, and then we use the rest for operating costs for our road officers. That includes vehicles, fuel, maintenance, uniforms, supplies, just anything they need to be out on the road working the highways. So
now we'll go to questions.
okay.
I do have a couple of questions. How many troopers do you have on the road, and then how many vehicle enforcement officers do we have on the road?
I don't have an exact number for you today. I can provide that for you. I believe our troopers working the road, I believe it's in excess of 400, but I don't have an exact number for you. I can provide that to you.
Okay.
And then I have a pretty close number of 39 sworn working the road.
Okay. On vehicle enforcement, do they primarily work the interstate or?
Yes, we try to focus on our high crash corridors that we pull from data statistics, but interstate's a a big portion of what we work, yes.
Okay. Senator Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate you all being here today. And forgive us sometime, I know the state police has a chain of command, and sometimes we don't understand the chain of command as well as we should here in the General Assembly, and we bounce back and forth. But we apologize for that. We don't always know exactly how to handle that, but thank you all for what you do. It's appreciate your service. Colonel Ham, on the one thing too that those lines of communication, if there's ever anything that we can do to help you all better do your job, we want to hear from you. And I know that's the state police are incredibly important to not just transportation but the whole state, and we want to do our part to support you.
We appreciate that.
So anytime we can do anything for you, please do not hesitate to let us know. And I think the latest numbers, or the last time we heard the commissioner talk about numbers, we're up over 1,000 back from those low numbers, or close to 700 back up to close to 1,000 troopers. And I think our authorized like 1,200 is what full. I guess a full authorization is, or is that number even relevant anymore?
I'm not sure what that number is. I believe it was. I know it exceeds 1,000. I'm not sure what the exact number is. We just graduated a cadet class, last month, and we were able to add 37 troopers to our agency. But with that being said, we've also this time of year we're starting to see some retirement paperwork coming in. So, as we add 37 new troopers, we will that will be offset by retirements.
Mr. Chairman, is it okay if I'm all right? One would assume that your new troopers, their first assignments out on the road to writing tickets and that sort of thing.
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, it's good to, you can kind of tell, the speeds on the interstate and the side roads. If they haven't seen a trooper in a while, they're posted plus 20 or 30. And if they've seen a trooper, it's posted plus 10. So I guess at 9 or 10 is a magic number where we won't get in too big trouble. But you don't have to answer that.
Thank you. Thanks for not putting me on the spot.
That speed limit's just a suggested.
Right.
But anyway, again, thank you for what you do, and it is important for your folks to be out there on the road and to be visible. And I know it's difficult. When we got down in the 700s, that was a very difficult mission to accomplish. So, Major Horton, 39. Talking about the thin gray line. That's really thin to cover the entire state. And I know you cover the interstate a lot. Overweight trucks are especially on our rural roads. And I know you do. We get calls from time to time when you do hit the rural roads, and they're in the wrong what they were doing. They've always done it and got away with it, and they kind of wonder why we're doing anything about it now. But we see one of the things that Representative Upchurch and members of this committee is the road plan, road dollars, and we do see a lot of damage on our rural roads from overweight trucks. Do you have? I know you all have the ability to weigh trucks to cite those overweight trucks, but is that a priority for you and your team?
It is. We submit a size and weight plan every year, and we currently are doing at least one monthly weigh detail a month, one weigh detail a month to try to counteract some of that.
Okay. What about folks using farm tags and doing commercial work. I know that's probably another one that's very difficult to determine. But do you see do you all have cite folks for that, or do you see that happening?
We cite it when we see it. It is hard to prove sometimes. There's a lot of exemptions for farmers. But yes, we do cite that when they are truly in violation, yes.
Well, I believe in the farm plates and farmers doing legitimate work. I'm talking about somebody that's really doing commercial work and disguised as a using that I guess that part of the law that they're disguising themselves as a farmer, but actually they're doing commercial business.
I've been off the road a while, but I would say it's not as prevalent as, or
Okay.
I don't see it as much as you may think.
Okay.
It's out there, but most
Yep.
of the time it's legitimate farmers.
Well, we're very supportive of the farm exemption. Okay, and I want to thank Angela Parker for being here today. And thank you for always being available if we have an issue, and getting us to where we need to go in the chain of command. We thank you for that. That's all the questions I had, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Major, thank you all for being here. Ms. Parker, always good to see you as well. Don't feel intimidated by these folks up here. They're intimidated by you all, okay?
Especially when you pull us over.
Especially when those blue lights are behind them, right? But so we talked a little bit about, you did, Colonel, about the class that just graduated, and we are, for people that doesn't know the KSP world, July is a big month for KSP for retirements. That's that month at the end of July. You'll have some periodically throughout the year for whatever reasons, but the bulk of them go this month. And not because of my position here, but because of my former life, I still get those personnel orders. So I know when those retirements are coming out, and I'm starting to see several of those begin to come out right now. So we've got 37. Hopefully, we still have a net gain. I don't know that we're going to after the retirements, but there is another class scheduled for November. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's tentatively scheduled for November.
And what is the number of cadets we're looking to take into that class?
Our goal is to accept around 100, maybe slightly over 100, pretty much as many as we can safely take in
Sure.
to start training.
Sure. And how is the application numbers going thus far? Are they on a good pace?
They actually are. I didn't bring any of that data
No,
with me.
I know.
But I can speak to receiving some emails and having some interaction with the commander over our recruitment branch. Our applications are up. We have tried to we have advertised a whole lot more. We've really been proactive in going out. Our recruiting efforts have really been emphasized over the last several months, and we are seeing a lot more applications. So we're very optimistic that we're going to have a large pool of people that will be able to start the academy.
Good. And I think, don't hold me to this, Mr. Chairman, but I think the authorized strength is 1160. Does that sound about right, Angela? I think it's 1160. I don't know where they come up with 60 at as a number. Sounds odd instead of 1150, but 1160. Love to see us get to that point, but quite frankly, we need to get to more. I don't know how much people understand about the state police, even in our own Commonwealth. They think oftentimes of the state police as a highway patrol in other states, and we're not. We're a full service agency, which means we do all the criminal work, and that means taking people from the roadway, making detectives, because we're working murders, we're working drugs, we're working human trafficking, we're working, everything that you can imagine, we're having to work that. And so oftentimes when we hear numbers, it's not necessarily indicative of what you're thinking about as that road uniform trooper out there, as you said, Mr. Chairman, writing speeding tickets. And even those folks are actually out answering domestic complaints. They're actually working burglaries. They're actually working theft complaints. And so there's a whole lot more goes into it. And I take this opportunity. I don't fear these folks up here as much as you all do. So, but I want them to have a better understanding of what you all are doing. You do a fabulous job. To quote a former commissioner that I worked under, we're the Marine Corps of law enforcement in Kentucky, the state police is, and we appreciate what you do. Keep up the good work, and know that you've always got an advocate and a family member here in the General Assembly. Thank you all.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Blanton. Just one other question, or if you could kind of speak to the weigh stations, how many we've got open, closed, if there's deficiencies, needs that you might have on those.
We've got 14 total. One of those 14 is mainly just just electronically monitors trucks coming through. We can't keep it staffed. It's in a very rural area. And then we've got 4 right now that are empty due to staffing issues, and a 5th that's about to be empty. Yeah. So we're running low on staff on those, but we're doing what we can with what we got.
Okay. Representative Blanton, you have another question?
Yes, one other question. I know we're getting off topic of what you came here for, but it still deals with your budget and what you're operating with. Colonel, does state police now have here in Frankfort, where our academy is located, do we have a firing range?
No, we do not.
I asked that question knowing the answer, but I want you to understand the premier law enforcement agency in the state doesn't even have its own firing range. We're borrowing from the city of Frankfort, or we were, are we still, Colonel?
That's for the use of it for around here. Yes, that is the entity that we have reached out to.
So the point being, when we're talking about funding and how they're using their monies, quite frankly, they could use a whole lot more funding, because there's things that they need that they don't have access to. And I would point out, the state police serves this entire state. They may not have troopers in every county like Fayette and Jefferson, but you got to look at our lab that's processing at no cost to every law enforcement agency in this state. We process every bit of their evidence. It costs them $0. So every single county, city is impacted by the state police here. So I just point that out to our members when we're talking about budget and what their needs are there, that they're not going to ask for, because I know how it was. We had a saying, and I guarantee you still say it to this day. We do more with less. We were always asked to do more with less. And so just wanted to point that out.
Senator Higdon.
Major Horton, I guess, do you have a recruiting class, or do you participate with state police on their?
State police helps with our recruiting, yes.
Okay.
And we have increased those efforts to try to fill those positions.
Okay. Thank you very much. And again, thank you all for your service. We do very much appreciate you. We don't want you to feel intimidated when you come here. We want to be very supportive of KSP.
We
and
appreciate
that's a goal of, I know everybody on this committee is to be very supportive.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from any other members? Well, we certainly thank you for presenting today, and again, echoing the comments of Chairman Blanton, Chairman Higdon. We appreciate you all, and if you have needs, please let us know what those are, so that we can start making plans to. Well, we know you firing range, but I mean weight stations, anything. Just kind of get us a list of things and cost of what you all would project those to be, and provide that to us. So, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is Ron Rigney. We're going to talk about federal funds match. Ron, if you don't care, just identify yourself for the record, and then you may proceed.
Thank you. Spring, I got it to work. Thank you very much. My name is Ron Rigney. I'm the Transportation Engineering Director for the Division of Program Management at the Transportation Cabinet. Thanks for inviting me here today. And we're here today to talk about the required matching funds on the federal program. I've got a slide presentation here I'm going to go through, and feel free as I'm going through this, if you've got questions on each individual slide, just, I'm here to try to give information. So we'll see what we can do here. First of all, this exhibit here, it's from the narrative in the Transportation Highway Plan, the 2024 Highway Plan. It's on page 12. And this is just a quick overview of comparison of the Kentucky formula funds, the federal aid program, the FAST Act versus the IIJA, the New Transportation Act. And what's really interesting on there, if you notice the average under FAST Act, Kentucky received about $722 million a year in federal aid highway funds. Under the new IIJA, we're receiving about $916 million a year. That's an increase of close to $200 million, round numbers. And if you look back, and we're talking about matching funds, if you look back at the average matching funds for the FAST Act program, which was roughly about $144 million a year. If you look at the new federal aid program under IIJA, it's about $183 million, and that's just a percentage, and that's using about 20% matching funds. So that's roughly about an additional $40 million a year in required matching funds. But that's on the surface of just looking at the percentages. So I want to drill a little bit deeper down into how the matching funds actually occurs. And again, this is another chart that's in the narrative of the highway plan. It's on page 18, and and I apologize, it's kind of blurry here because I purposely just took a picture and put it in the PowerPoint right out of the narrative of the highway plan, so you could see this is something that was already included in the narrative. But this breaks down the federal aid highway program. It's broken down into different funding program categories. And when I talk about categories, that's the different types of funds. And within each program category, there's regulations that we have to meet in order to be able to use those funds out of those funding categories. And as an example, those regulations, each funding category has what's called a fact sheet. And within that fact sheet, it lists your eligibility requirements and eligibility items. It talks about the eligible project activities, basically what type of work we're talking about. It talks about has to be on, the functional roadway classification that those funds can be used on, like the national highway, the NH funds can only be used on the national highway system, interstate system, parkway. It also talks about when you get down into the more detailed formula funding into the STP categories, a lot of those categories are actually based upon the population of the area that you're trying to do the project or you want to do the project. So there's a population requirement that comes into place on the STP dollars. And then again, it talks about each different funding category. There's a required matching amount. There's a percentage. And on this chart here, the third column over, it actually lists each of the required matching funds for each of those different categories. And that's a quick reference. And again, this is on page 18 of the narrative. So if you ever have a question, just look in the narrative of the highway plan and you can see what the required percentage is. Okay, the federal aid highway program is conducted in accordance with the current federal funding formulas, which I've talked about, and the regulations, which again I've talked about, as outlined within the Transportation Act approved by Congress and is signed into law by the President. The current Transportation Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Program, the IIJA that I mentioned, was signed into law on November the 15th in 2021 by President Joe Biden, and that law was a 5-year program. The Federal Aid Highway Program is a reimbursement program, and I underline that reimbursement. Please keep that in mind. It's a reimbursement, which means that project expenditures must be paid for up front. And then the state sends a request to FHWA for reimbursement of those eligible costs. So again, we have to pay for the expenditures up front, and then we seek reimbursement. The Federal Aid Highway Program is allocated each year to each state through congressional budget authority and is administered through the Federal Aid Highway Administration, FHWA. And by the way, I'm going to shout out a good shout for our local FHWA, Kentucky FHWA folks. We have a great group at Kentucky FHWA that we get to work with. They really help us, and we try to help them. The approval by Congress is a yearly process, and oftentimes Congress does not approve the entire yearly allocation in one budget bill. And they may approve budget bills through continuing resolutions, and I know you've all heard about continuing resolution on the national level. And those continuing resolutions, they only allocate part of the anticipated yearly federal aid highway program. They don't allocate it all at once through those continuing resolutions. These continuing resolutions outline a specified number of days. Some of these resolutions, if you all remember, they may be a 30-day continuing resolution. Some may be 16. We've had some even like a week that are just continuing resolutions. So those depending on the length of those resolutions when they expire, that's how the funding percentage is released. So, and those specified number of days determines the allocation amount of the Federal Aid Highway Program funding that is being made available to the states at that point in time during that, the fiscal year. Depends on the number of days. The delay in receiving the entire yearly allocation of Federal Aid Highway funding makes it extremely difficult for the states, and I'm not talking about just Kentucky, I'm talking about all states. It makes it extremely difficult for the states to manage their overall yearly federal aid program. As you can only imagine, if we're getting at the beginning of the fiscal year, come October the 1st, if we only receive 30 days, 60 days, maybe 90 days of the entire yearly allocation, and then we bump right up against the end of that continuing resolution, they give, Congress gives another extension of another 30 days or 60 days. It's difficult to look at your entire program when you're only getting, 30 365ths of your total allocation, or 60 365ths. So it's a difficult process. Please keep in mind that in order to obligate Federal Aid Highway Program funding, KYTC, we submit a federal programming document to FHWA outlining the scope of the work, the corresponding phases of the project. When we go in and we authorize funds, we don't authorize all the funds for design, right-of-way, utility, and construction all at one time. We do it based on the individual phase when we're ready to use those funds. It outlines the type of federal funds, again, going back to the different categories. It may be STP, it may be NH, it could be safety funds, but depending on what type of project we're trying to get the federal funds approved for. It outlines the amount of the federal funding. It outlines the amount of required matching funds, and on this request, the FHWA's, we're requesting FHWA approval of the obligation of those requested federal aid funds for that corresponding project phase. And again, each one of these federal documents, as we work with FHWA, it's specific to a certain project. It's not for the overall program. It's down to the project level, down to the phase level, and the detailed of what type of work, what type of funds, and how much we're using. FHWA, they review the programming document, and if they concur, they sign the programming document agreeing that the project is eligible for federal aid funds. This federal programming document is actually the project agreement between KYTC and FHWA that the corresponding project phase activities are eligible for reimbursement of federal funds in accordance with those federal funding regulations. So that's these documents, they're their agreement between FHWA and the cabinet that says this specified project that you're trying to get federal funds for or approval to use federal funds, it's eligible for the type that you've asked for. The FHWA approval date on the programming document is the beginning date that project expenditures are eligible for reimbursement. Any project expenditures occurring prior to the approval date are not eligible for reimbursement of federal funds. So when you're talking to your district people in the district and they say, well, we're trying to get the federal funds program, we're trying to get the federal, we can't start on the project yet but until we have those federal funds approved. Keep that in mind because, and we really stressed all of our project managers that if a project that's using federal funds, don't start on those activities, expending project costs until we have this federal agreement in place, because if we do, any of those expenditures would not be eligible for federal participation to get reimbursed. So when you talk to the district folks, they'll tell you, well, we're program management up in Frankfurt, they're trying to get the funds set up. That's us. That's program management. We're trying to do that. As the project activities begin on the federally funded project and as project expenditures are paid for work associated with the corresponding project phase, KYTC pays for those expenditures up front. Again, as expenditures occur, KYTC, we pay for those expenditures up front. Then KYT submits to FHWA a request for reimbursement of eligible project expenditures on federally funded project phases through an electronic federal billing process. Usually this occurs once a week. It's not on a daily basis, it's usually like once a week, and we have a complete federal bill that takes all the federally funded projects that's on the books, and as those expenditures that have been paid out during the previous week, those we start trying to seeking reimbursement for those expenditures. On most federally funded projects, the amount of eligible federal funding for reimbursement is 80%. That's on the normal 80%. Some of them may be 90-10, some 80-20 is the normal. And the amount of required state matching funds is 20%. All right, so it's normally, most of them are 80-20. Now, as an example, if the federally funded project has $100,000 in project expenditures, okay, when KYTC submits the reimbursement for FHWA or from FHWA, they can only request $80,000 of those expenditures, okay? You have $100,000 expenditures on the books. It's a federally funded project at 80-20%, 80% federal, 20% match. When we seek reimbursement, we can only seek $80,000 of reimbursement. And the $20,000 difference is the required state matching funds. That's if you want the bottom line of state matching funds, that is the definition. It's whatever the type of federal funds that are set up as expenditures occur, when we seek reimbursement, depending on what the percentage is that we can get back, that's federal. The difference is the state match. That's the required match. Included within the IIJA Transportation Act are numerous competitive, quote, competitive USDOT grant programs. And I would be remiss if I didn't say they're very, very competitive programs. States, local public agencies, and other governmental entities are eligible to apply for these grants to help fund projects that fit the requirements of each grant opportunity. Different grants have different requirements, different opportunities, different amounts you can apply for, different match. USDOT issues notices of funding opportunities, what we refer to as NOFOs, for each of the competitive grant programs, allowing states, LPAs, and other eligible entities to submit applications for grant funds. Okay, it's through an application process. The grant funding applications outline the project scope, estimated cost of the project, available non-federal and other federal funding for the project, the amount of grant funding being requested, and it also outlines the source and the amount of required non-federal matching funds. This source of amount of non-federal funds, keep that in mind, because that's really, when we're talking about these competitive programs, depending on that source and the amount of those non-federal funds that can be considered as matching funds, in your application, you can leverage that to help make that application more competitive with other applications across the entire nation. Again, trying to get an edge on the competitiveness. USDOT has awarded numerous USDOT grant projects throughout the Commonwealth. Kentucky's been very successful in getting the USDOT grants, and we greatly appreciate that, as I know you all are as well. The 2024 General Assembly under House Bill 1, as amended by Senate Bill 91, Section 55, appropriated general funds from the Budget Reserve Trust Fund account in the amount of $150 million for the I-69 ORX project, contingent upon award of a federal USDOT multimodal project discretionary grant for the project. KYTC and NDOT, we have jointly applied for $210 million of MPDG funding for the project. And within the USDOT grant application for the $210 million of MPDG grant funds, KYTC stressed the pledge of that $150 million of general funds that is over and above the required match for the grant funding. Again, that's a way to try to get up on being competitive with all across the nation. This is a huge pledge for the overall project cost. The USDOT federal MPDG grant selection process is underway, and the results will not be made known until late summer, early fall of this year. We don't know yet how successful we've been, but we're trying. Also within House Bill 1 there was under the same category, there was $150 million of general funds for the Mount Parkway expansion project, again, contingent upon the award of the federal USDOT multimodal project discretionary grant. Kentucky, KYTC, we've applied for $116 million of MPDG grant funds for the project. Again, in the application, we're really stressed. Okay, we're seeking $116 million of MPDG grant, but we stress the pledge of that $150 million of general funds if the Commonwealth is awarded $116 million of MPDG grant funds. We've really stressed that. Again, we don't know. It should be later this summer, early fall. With that, thank you for, if you have any questions, I'll try to do the best I can to answer them.
Thank you, Ron. We've got Representative Blanton has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, I tell you what, before we do that, I notice Representative Tackett Lafferty has a guest. Would you like to introduce him?
Beside me is Owen Walker. This is my youngest of three. He is named after his grandpa, and he will be in the 2nd grade. And actually, over there in the corner is my pretty little niece, Ruby Tackett. She is named after her grandmother, and she was just, Frankfurt needs to get ready for her because she was just elected as president of the National Honor Society at Model Elementary School in Richmond.
That's
So,
great. Let's give-
Thank you very much.
She's looking at you like I'll get you later. All right, Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me point out so the members understand in your slide when you're talking about the grant application for the I-69 Oryx project. That's the Brent's Bench Bridge project, correct?
No, it's the one down Henderson.
Oh, okay, the one in Henderson.
Correct.
You did not mention the Brent Spence Bridge then.
We've already received a grant for that one, correct?
That one has already been approved. What are the thoughts on the Mountain Parkway? Are we anticipating that we think we'll get that grant?
We have great hopes of receiving that grant, and we appreciate the General Assembly approving that $150 million of general funds to go towards that application, again, as a pledge. And we're hoping that that is really, really going to make that project very, very competitive in the grant application process.
Also, are you aware that at least out of committee thus far in Washington, that Congressman Rogers has included, I think it's around 35 million, give or take a little bit, for the Mountain Parkway project?
37 or 38.
Okay, so
And that is a congressional earmark that it's made its way out of the House, which will be the Senate has their opportunity to come up with their list. So at least it's made its way onto the House approved list, and then once they get both lists, they will be combined together, and then it'll be determined in the FY budget authority after October the 1st, whether it's successful in getting those.
yes.
Correct.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative McPherson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I spent a lot of my early life as a negotiator and then staff appraiser at the Highway Department. And you're right, it was very important that we signed off on the right authorization number of what we were working on each day. And, that was something that we, the public would get notice that there were stakes out there and we were doing stuff and they were ready for us to bite at the bit, and wanted to come in and sit and talk to us. And until we got authorization from you all that we had that the federal money was appropriated, we'd get our hands smacked pretty hard if we went to work on them, for sure. But my question was, so do you all keep a running total? You said you got a 5-year. This plan that was signed was a 5-year plan. Do you all keep any kind of running total on how quickly this money is? Like, is it held 30 days or 60 days, or how long is it normal that we have to put the money out before the federal pays us back? What's our holding time, and does that expand and contract over the year?
Okay, I'll answer that in a couple different ways. All right. Now, if I understand correctly, you're talking about on projects that we are already actively working on.
Correct.
As expenditures occur.
Correct.
How long do we have to wait before we get reimbursed? All right. Normally, we do a weekly billing process.
Okay.
So we normally turn that in like on a Friday. Then the following Monday, Tuesday timeframe, we get those reimbursements back.
Okay. So it's a pretty quick turnaround.
Pretty quick turnaround on getting the money back from FHWA.
Yeah. If I could, Mr. Chairman, the Eastern Kentucky flood disasters and everything, the money that we came through with that, has any of that been paid back yet? All that money that we basically had to spend out?
You're talking on the FEMA
FEMA
side,
correct.
We have yes, we've got not all of it, but we have been receiving parts of it back, and that's then it's going better than normal, I guess you might say.
Yeah.
FEMA, the ER side, the FHWA side is great. I mean, they're really good about getting the money released pretty quickly. FEMA side is a little more
Stringent.
difficult because the getting all the documentation submitted to them in the exact way that they want it may take more than once to accomplish that. And so sometimes those are being delayed.
But they're coming in.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Higdon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to talk about Rocky, but since he's in the room now, I'll avoid that. No, welcome, Rocky. Ron, thank you for the work you do, and like I said, we talked to you a lot during budget session, and it's amazing the knowledge you have about Kentucky's transportation system. It's just thank you for that institutional knowledge is incredible. So thank you. The old toll credits. I know we're still using a few on some things, but I don't guess we'll ever accumulate any. Is there a possibility of ever accumulating additional toll credits in the future?
If we built roads with tolls to earn that.
Okay, well, we might just make a note of that.
But going back to the toll credits, one of the things that we did on the original Garvey bonds that we sold bonds for to do the interstate widening, the I-75, 64, and 65, as well as the bridges down in West Kentucky, and the Ohio River Bridge at Louisville. Those toll credits we earned in those projects. When we sold the Garvey bonds, the required match for those programs, we used toll credits, and those amount of toll credits were set aside for those bonds, and those are the toll credits we're using right now on paying off those remaining Garvey bonds. Some of the older projects that used toll credits, when we, depending on if those toll credits are after 2015, if any funds, our federal funds are released, which we've released some of those toll credits, they are made available back to us to use, and a lot of times we'll use those released toll credits to cover change orders on other projects that had the toll credits as a match. So it's really they're basically being used as made available.
We were currently doing tolls on the Louisville bridges. We accumulate any credits for those tolls? Just
it was the amount up front when we built it.
Okay. We talked about Hal Rogers, earmarks, but we've also we talked about applications for grants. We also have a grant application in for some work on the Hal Rogers Parkway, correct?
Correct, we did, and we did not receive that grant.
Okay, then I assume we will apply again at the next.
Correct.
Now, one of the reasons we've been successful on some of them was the amount of match that we put up. Mm-hmm. You recall what the match was that we did on this application for
20%.
20%.
Yeah.
We might have to up that a little bit because we've not done real well on 20%.
Yeah, that was for a planning grant of
Okay.
environmental. Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Back to you explain the national highway or the types of funding we have, and it has to be approved by the Federal Highway Administration. But if we designate something as national highway, it doesn't necessarily have to be on the national highway system. But it has to be approved by it has to be approved by them for that funds to be used on that.
If we have a project that's listed with NH funds or NHPM funds in the highway, that project has to be on the national highway system to use those type of funds.
Okay. Thank you.
It's based on the functional classification.
Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions of any of the members? Ron, we appreciate you appreciate the time that you spent with us before the session and into the session with our members. It's astounding. Senator Higdon talked about the institutional knowledge that you have, and it's an incredible amount of knowledge that you have over there at Transportation, and it astounds me, all the different nuances of on the federal money and all the different codes that goes that you have a good command of. So we appreciate you.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say we have a great team at KYTC. We work really, really close together, and again, we work close with FHWA as well.
That's good. All right. No further questions. I think I need a motion to adjourn. We are now adjourned. How's that?